Hey everyone, Stacks here, covering House of X number 6, and I'm already arguing with people on Twitter over some of the stuff that happened in this book, so it's going to be fun, so check it out, because I gotta hear from you guys at the end on what you think of some of the stuff that happened in this book. Now, I will say this book is light on action, but it's really big on setting the pieces in place on how that these mutants are going to run their government going forward, and how they're going to make the laws of the land. But let's go ahead and start with the book. The book starts with the Hickman foreshadowing quote, which is what we have perfect? No, what is? But it's a start, and a good one, and the quote being from Professor X. We then jump to 1 month ago in Krakoa. Underneath Krakoa, you have Moira's no space, which is actually Professor X's secret cradle. And there you have Moira McTaggart, Professor X, and Magneto discussing. This is the point where this is total commitment. There's no turning back from here. And they all agree. They all confirm, yes, we're moving forward with this. And at that moment, Magneto walks up, puts his hand on Charles's shoulder, and tells him whatever has happened up to this point over the years, all of our disagreements, that ends today. You have my word. And Charles just puts his hand on top of his and looks him in the eye, and then he suits up. He puts on the Cerebro. And what he does next is huge. He reaches out to every normal human on Earth, and he explains to them what the mutants are offering. He explains to every human on Earth that mutant scientists have discovered these miracle pharmaceuticals that can cure so many of their maladies, including influenza, Alzheimer's, ALS, a lot of forms of cancer, all of it, and can cure it overnight. And could you imagine what that would mean if that hit you? You have a sick kid or a sick loved one, and suddenly this voice in your head is telling you that there's a drug that's going to be available for you to heal them. He also has to explain to them that at one point this would have been a gift from mutantkind to humankind, so that because the dream was that we could all live together, but that dream was a lie. And because it was a lie, this is now going to come with a cost. We want our own sovereign nation, Krakoa, and we're going to go through all the steps through the UN to do that, but we also want to ensure that any mutant they're a Krakoan citizen. And of course, we know the back end of this because we saw it earlier, and that is that it will be confirmed as a sovereign nation by the majority of the UN countries, and unfortunately it's going to take some manipulation, and Russia, Iran, North Korea, some of those countries are going to stay out, as well as Wakanda and Latveria. And another interesting point, hitting on like Latveria and Wakanda, is that you see the Avengers, you see the Fantastic Four, you see Doctor Strange, and a lot of the old Illuminati come into play here when they're having this discussion. And it has that ominous sense of foreshadowing that we're heading to another X-Men versus Avengers type event, but this time with Jonathan Hickman behind the wheel, and that could be awesome. From there, we get a look at a white page, and it's all the seats except for one of the Quiet Council of Krakoa. You have Autumn, which is Professor X, Magneto, and Apocalypse. Winter, which is Mr. Sinister, Exodus, Mystique. Spring, you have the Black King, Sebastian Shaw. White Queen, Emma Frost, and the Red King is still redacted. Summer, you have Storm, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler. And then you have Krakoa, the 13th and 14th member, Cypher and Krakoa. Underneath that, you have what they're calling the Great Captains, and you have 4 of them. Cyclops, Gorgon, Bishop, and Magic. Now, while all these 4 Great Captains are considered equals, on the battlefield, Cyclops is basically the field general. And now that you've kind of fully been introduced to who the council is, well, we get to sit in on their first meeting. And honestly, I don't think anybody has looked more out of place in a meeting than Apocalypse. Something about him just sitting there and going, guys, I've got to talk to you about your TPS reports. Just something about it hit me as funny. Now, unfortunately, they're not here to talk about reports. They're here to talk about establishing the law of the land. And in doing so, they have to deal with their first big issue, and that is Sabertooth. As you probably remember, back in House of X number 1, Sabertooth killed a couple guards while they were stealing a piece of equipment from a secret facility. But before they even get to talking about Sabertooth, they have to decide what is and isn't law here on Krakoa. And the logic here is really interesting because everybody's like, yeah, murder's bad. Well, you can't really murder a mutant anymore because we'll just reconstitute them. We'll hit the refresh button and we'll have a new one by the end of the week. So this is where Jean Grey hops in and says, well, what about the worst thing you can do is kill someone who can't be reconstituted? So you can't kill a human. Well, Mystique tries to play the, well, what about defending Krakoa and what about, war? And Magneto shoots her down and says, that's not what we're discussing right now. So with that, they just established a law. They just now established a law saying that you can't murder humans, but they're going to retroactively enforce this onto Sabertooth. Well, needless to say, he ain't too happy about having an example made out of him. And as he starts to threaten the whole council, it takes Emma Frost telling him to be quiet and attacking his mind. Well, that doesn't stop him. Jean Grey has to hop in and also try to shut him down. Well, that does it, and he's out slobbering on himself for a little while. But they start to discuss some of the other laws. The second law that they introduce after you cannot murder humans is that you basically have to respect Krakoa, the land of Krakoa, that their home. And this came up after Sebastian Shaw brought up property rights, and Cypher had to point out there ain't any property around here. You're not selling part of Krakoa as property. He's a living, breathing sentient being. You can't sell him off. The third law comes in when Mystique tries to corner Nightcrawler on, well, hey, we've asked everybody else, what does the man of God here say? And Kirk, going all the way back to the garden, thinks, and God said unto them to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. And so isn't it obvious what we should do? We should make more mutants. And with that, you have the first three laws of Krakoa. Make more mutants, murder no man, and respect this sacred land. And of course, while setting all these laws was nice, you still have the issue of Sabertooth to deal with. Well, when it comes to the judgment of Sabertooth, Magneto is the first one to speak up. And he states that I gave you strict instructions when I sent you on your mission, and you did not listen. You made your bed creed. Let your sleeping in it serve a higher purpose. And everyone on the council agrees. And of course, not being one to go down without a fight, he charges towards Xavier when Krakoa reaches up and just grabs him and drags him into this dark abyss. And as he goes down into this darkness, it's explained that he will stay down there. He will be unable to move in this exile, but he will be conscious. He'll basically be just sitting down there in the dark. And they can't just execute him because that would actually enact the resurrection process that they go through. So I highly suspect at some point he is going to cause some folks on Krakoa a lot of problems in the near future. And with that, the council is dismissed, and Professor X looks back over his shoulder as everyone's getting ready to leave, and he says, it's distasteful, I know, this business of running a nation. I pray we never get used to it, that we never grow cold from it, that we never learn to love it. And as the mutants walk out, as the council walks out, they walk out onto a scene of celebration. All of the mutants, knowing they've just taken this giant step towards establishing their own nation, are out there celebrating. Dazzler is using her and Siren are combining their powers to just light up the sky like the 4th of July. And X-Men and former enemies are all in this space together, and you have Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine hanging out. You have Wolverine approach Gorgon and offer him a drink. Bitter enemies putting stuff behind them. Emma Frost and Jean Grey the same way. It's really a touching moment in that mutandom is coming together. But in all of this, you have a triumphant Magneto and Professor Xavier, but you have a Apocalypse who's sitting there just like there's a weight on his shoulders. It just seems like he lacks contentment. This isn't how he wanted this to end. This isn't the challenge that he ultimately hoped for. And the closing sentence from Magneto, just look at what we have made. So this book is definitely a recommend just because it's putting so many things in place. And if I want all of Powers of X and all of House of X just because I want all of them, because it's been that good of a series, and I'm gonna box it. I'm probably gonna open it up and reread it a few times. It's been a really, really good series, just it's been so deep, it's been so interesting. There's been so many points, so many theories that have come up and either gotten legs to him or been destroyed. So Jonathan Hickman has definitely been bringing it, but he's had a great team. Pepe Larraz in this one, the art was absolutely fantastic. Marte Gracia on the art has been killing it throughout this entire series on both Powers of X and House of X. David Carell stepped in on colors on this one. I think some of it was Marte Garcia and some of it was David Carell, but it was seamless, no real issue. This book and this thing from Apocalypse. I'll throw this up here. This was an advertisement that came out on Twitter, and it very much speaks to Apocalypse in this. So it actually has me excited even more for Excalibur and these other books that are coming out after. The Marauders, the X-Force, all those books suddenly seem a lot more interesting. I am interested to see who the Red King is. I'd love to hear you guys' guesses on that. I absolutely don't know what else I could say about this book other than it's an absolute total recommend. Go pick it up. I think this is going to be the last happy issue you have before Powers of X takes us to a much darker place, just guessing, based off the cover and based on kind of how this story has been going. But regardless, I'll be there Wednesday first thing to get that picked up and get it read and get the video up for it. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. I will be covering all 6 of the X-Men books as they come out, at least the first 3 or so issues, and to make sure they're all decent, and I'll just pick up which ones that I'm excited about from there. But by the looks of things, every single book has some kind of promise to it that I'm really looking forward to.